The following contains f***ed up shit. Viewer discretion is advised.
Guys, this is a new segment on the show that we're going to be calling bookablaga. And to give all praises due to the person who we stole that sound from, this first series of books will be all devoted to conspiracy. Family of Secrets by a guy named Russ Baker, a reporter named Russ Baker. The subtitle of the book is The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government, and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years. And that's what this book is really about. It uses the Bush family as a sort of way into this shadowy, creepy world that, this is one of those books that if anything is in here is true, whoa boy. Most of the first part of this book is devoted to the JFK assassination.
Back and to the left.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there's this guy, JFK. I don't know what that stands for. But he was killed, and everything about it was weird and shadowy, and it basically made everyone in the country paranoid. And never have I heard such a good explanation, such a convincing, in the true sense of the word here, conspiracy theory. This book lays it out better than I've ever heard. And in order to give you a little taste of what's in here, of what's in this book, I would like to turn your attention to probably the weirdest, definitely one of the weirdest figures in American history, George de Mohrenschildt.
In 1976, more than a decade after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, a letter arrived at the CIA addressed to its director, the Honorable George Bush. The letter was from a desperate-sounding man in Dallas who spoke regretfully of having been indiscreet in talking about Lee Harvey Oswald and begged George H.W. Bush for help.
Interesting thing about this guy, very long story which is laid out all in this book, and this is just one piece of what he lays out in this book. But this guy was very much connected to the CIA.
And also Jorge Bush.
But also randomly befriended very closely, spent a bunch of time with none other than a little guy goes by the name Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Patton Oswald.
Maybe you will be able to bring a solution into the hopeless situation I find myself in. My wife and I find ourselves surrounded by some vigilantes. Our phone bugged, and we are being followed everywhere. Either FBI is involved in this, or they do not want to accept my complaints. We are driven to insanity by this situation. I tried to write, stupidly and unsuccessfully, about Lee H. Oswald, and must have angered a lot of people.
So when this crazy letter comes into the CIA, the people, the administrators or whatever who opened it, just assumed it was a kook, a common kook. But then actually George Bush, who was the head of this place at the time, said, no, I do know that guy. Now, he played down the degree to which he knew this guy, as Russ Baker explains. But he had to admit it, that he knew this guy, that this was not a kook. And here's what happened not too long after that letter was sent to the CIA in 1977.
De Mohrenschildt gave an interview to author Edward J. Epstein, during which he claimed that in 1962, Dallas CIA operative J. Walton Moore and one of Moore's associates had handed him the address of Lee Harvey Oswald in nearby Fort Worth, and then suggested that de Mohrenschildt might like to meet him.
So a decade later, in the 70s, de Mohrenschildt does this interview with this reporter and says, yeah, the CIA set me up with Lee Harvey Oswald. And I have to say this, their friendship, being so close especially, makes very little sense. De Mohrenschildt was a right-wing guy, an oil business guy who hung out with fancy upper-class upper-crusters. Lee Harvey Patton Oswald was supposedly a very serious communist and supporter of Castro and blah, 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 blah. And the Soviet Union and da-da-da-da-da.
That afternoon, de Mohrenschildt was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot shotgun wound to the head in a house at which he was staying in Florida. The coroner's verdict was suicide.
Excuse me, what's that? If you actually read through this book, the friendship was not a coincidence between Lee Harvey Oswald and this George de Mohrenschildt guy.
Well, we met Oswald in the summer of 1962.
So when I read that quote from this de Mohrenschildt guy, him begging for help and that people were chasing him and the FBI was chasing him, my initial thought was, oh, this guy's a kook. And that may be true. He may have been a kook. The problem, though, and what makes him such an interesting character is, of course, is that he was obviously connected to high-ranking people in the CIA.
The timing of his overseas ventures was remarkable. Invariably, when he was passing through a town, a covert or even overt operation appeared to be unfolding. An invasion, a coup, that sort of thing. In the spring of 1963, immediately after his final communication with Oswald, de Mohrenschildt had traveled to New York and Washington for meetings with CIA and military intelligence officials. He even had met with a top aide to Vice President Johnson. And the commission certainly did not learn that one meeting in New York included Thomas Devine, then George H.W. Bush's business colleague in Zapata offshore, who was doing double duty for the CIA.
This George de Mohrenschildt guy definitely went crazy. He even went as far as to say that a Jewish mafia, the Jewish mafia, was after him. He, according to his wife, tried to commit suicide multiple times. He was committed to a mental institution. There's another detail about this guy going crazy, de Mohrenschildt, that's left out of pretty much every other source I looked at besides Russ Baker's book, Family of Secrets. A year after George de Mohrenschildt's death, Jean would tell a journalist a completely different story about what precipitated George's hospitalization. She claimed that a doctor had appeared in Dallas for a brief period and administered injections to him. Following those injections, she said, George suffered a nervous breakdown, at which point she decided to have him hospitalized. The doctor, she claimed, vanished into thin air. So what the fuzz is going on here? And how does this fit into the bigger history that Russ Baker describes in this book? Not just the JFK assassination, but really the history of the past 60, 70 years. Well, if you want to get the whole review, Patreon. Become a patron for as little as $5. You could get the entire review in either video or audio, whatever you want. You support the show, and every week I'm uploading a new full-length bookablaga.